This week we are focusing on one pot meals. These are perfect for those busy weeknights when you want to get food on the table quick, but you don't want to make a huge mess, but you still want that delicious home cooked meal. So let's go ahead and get started with this first recipe in this video, and this is called Meat Lovers Tortellini. So I've got 1 pound of hamburger meat here, 1 pound of ground Italian sausage, and then I also chopped up half an onion and threw that in there. And now we're going to season this the way we like it. So I added some garlic parmesan seasoning by Kinder, which has salt in it, as well as Montreal steak seasoning and Italian seasoning. And I'm just doing that to taste, so feel free to throw in whatever you want to season this up. We are going to add more seasonings to this recipe, but this is just seasoned to taste right now. And then once we get that done and finish cooking this, we're going to go ahead and strain this to make sure we get all of that grease out, and then we're going to add it back to the pan and add the rest of our seasonings. So I'm going to add in 1 teaspoon of Italian seasoning, and then I'm going to do a half a teaspoon of Kinder's garlic parmesan. If you've never used this, it does have salt in it, so just keep that in mind. You could substitute that for garlic powder if you wanted to do that, or you could just leave it out. Next, I'm going to be adding my pizza sauce. It doesn't matter what kind. I just got the Walmart brand, and then I'm going to go ahead and pour a 24-ounce jar in here of this. And then I also ended up doing about 1/4 of another one. Once I get that jar poured in there, though, I am going to go ahead and add in my 5 cheese tortellini. This is the refrigerated kind, and it is an 18-ounce bag. I'm going to cook it right into my meal. But if you want to cook it separately, you can do that as well. But I wanted to cook mine in here just to keep down on the dishes, and it was so simple to do. So I just poured that whole 18-ounce bag in there, and I'm just going to stir this up, and then this is where I'm going to add my 1/4 of my other jar of pizza sauce. And I also took my pizza sauce jar that was empty, and I filled it about 1/4 of a way with water, and I poured that in here as well. That way our tortellinis will have some water to absorb as well, and that way it will make it a little bit quicker on the cooking. And then also I'm going to add in my pepperonis to this. So I've just got a bag of regular pepperonis, and some of them I am going to chop and cut up. But I ended up deciding that it really wasn't worth it to cut these up, and I'm just going to put them in there whole, and it was really good like that. So do that however you would like. But just feel free to add as many out of the bag as you want into this, but make sure you keep enough to put on the top. At least that's what I did, and it turned out really well. I just took some pepperonis and I separated them individually, because if you don't, they're going to stick together and they won't really separate as well when you stir this up. And just throw a bunch in there to your taste, and then give it a stir and let your tortellini finish cooking. And then once that's done cooking, we're going to go ahead and take some mozzarella cheese, and we're just going to sprinkle that over the top of this and just cover it really well. And then once we do that, we are going to take our leftover pepperoni slices that we have, and we are just going to layer those over the top of this and just get a good covering with it. And then once we do that, this is finished, and I'm just going to take my lid, and I've got my burner off at this point, and I'm just going to let that cheese melt. That just took about maybe 2 minutes, if that. And if you did have an oven-safe pan that you cooked this in, you could always pop it under the broiler even and let those pepperonis crisp up a little bit. But that was it. This was so good. It was so easy to throw together, and my family loved it. This would also be good with bell peppers in it, black olives, anything like that to make it a supreme version. This would also be good topped with red pepper flakes or Parmesan, and this was so simple and so good. Enjoy! Next, we are going to be making cheesy chicken broccoli orzo. This was so good and so simple. So I've got 3 heads of broccoli here, and I'm just going to wash those really well, and then I'm going to chop off the stems and cut these down into bite-sized pieces for the size that we like. Once I get finished with that, I'm going to take about 1 pound to 1.5 pounds of chicken tenderloins, and I'm just going to cut those down into bite-sized pieces as well. And I'm going to clean those up and get all those pieces off that I don't like on it. Once we get finished with that, we're just going to take these over to our skillet, and we're going to pour some olive oil into that, and then we're going to start cooking this and seasoning it. So I just used seasonings that I liked on the chicken, which was salt. And I'm just doing that to taste all of this right now, but we'll get into the measured seasonings here in a little bit. But I did salt, pepper, And then I'm doing the original Mrs. Dash. And I'm also going to go in with some Kinder's roast chicken seasoning. And then I'm just going to stir that up really well. And I'm just going to cook this chicken all the way through. Make sure everything is good and done and we don't have to worry about anything. And then once we finish cooking that chicken all the way through, we're going to start adding our other ingredients to this pan. So we're going to do 3 cups of chicken broth. If you have already made chicken broth, go ahead and pour 3 cups of that in. But I am doing 3 cups of water, and then I'm going to be using this better than bouillon. So I am following the instructions on how much water to add to this. But once I get that put in there, I'm going to go ahead and give everything a really good stir to make sure that all gets dissolved in and mixed up. But as it cooks, it'll dissolve and mix up better. But I just want to go ahead and try to get it stirred as best I can. And then I'm going to add in a couple teaspoons of parsley flakes. And then after I do that, I'm also going to add 1 teaspoon of dried thyme leaves. And this is going to give this food some really good flavor. So once you get those measured out and get those poured in, we're also going to go ahead and add in 1/4 teaspoon of salt. And, you can always add salt later, but we just don't want this to get too salty. So I'm going to do 1/4 teaspoon. And then after I do that, I'm going to stir it up real good. And then I'm going to add in some garlic parmesan Kinder seasoning. This is optional and it does have just a little bit of salt in it, so don't go heavy on it if you have never used it. And then I'm also going to add in some caramelized onion butter, just barely a little bit of that. And then I'm going to add 1 teaspoon of onion powder. Feel free to change these seasonings up however you want to do it. But once I get those added in, we're just going to go ahead and stir this up again. And then I'm going to add in my Orzo. So I've got a 16-ounce box of this uncooked, and I'm just going to dump the whole box into this. So once I dump that in, I'm going to give it a quick stir, and then I am going to go ahead and add my raw broccoli in now. But if you want yours to be a little crunchier, you can add it in later, or you can blanch it in a separate pot and then add it in whenever it is completely finished. But I'm going to add mine in now, and I'm going to let it cook along with my Orzo. So we're going to cover this up, and we are just going to leave this on a medium-low heat and just let it simmer and let it get good and hot. This ain't going to take maybe 10 to 12 minutes to finish up cooking everything. You do want to make sure that you stir this a couple times just to make sure that everything is getting broth properly and there's nothing sticking and burning at the bottom of this. But once your Orzo is finished and tender, you're just going to sprinkle some cheese on the top of this. I use sharp cheddar. I just replace the lid on this just for a couple minutes and let that cheese melt, and then that's it. This is ready to serve. This was so good and it was so simple. Such an easy weeknight meal. Enjoy! Next we are making 1 pot lasagna. So I've got a pound of breakfast sausage here, and then I've got about half an onion, and I've just chopped that up roughly. After I do that, I'm going to go ahead and cook these together, and I'm going to start crumbling up my breakfast sausage. I want mine to be pretty small and fine. However you want to do yours would be good. I just really like to always cook my meat and my onions together because the onions really help flavor the meat, and it also gives them a chance to get soft so they won't be crunchy real bad in your food. But once we do that, I'm going to strain my sausage, and then I'm going to add 2 tablespoons of Italian seasoning in this, and then I'm also going to do like a 1/2 teaspoon of garlic powder. If you want yours stronger or you don't like garlic powder, just leave it out. I know some people love it and some people really hate it, so that's perfectly fine. But I'm just going to add that in, and then once I get that added in, I am going to do about 1/4 teaspoon of salt. If you don't want to add any extra salt, that's perfectly fine. But as I always say, I start small because you can always add more later if there's not enough, whereas if you add too much, the dish is pretty much ruined. But we're just going to stir that up really well, and then we're going to add in our 3 cups of beef broth. So I like to use the Better Than Bouillon roasted beef base, but if you want to do the chicken, or if you want to do the bouillon cubes, or however you want to do this, but I'm doing beef broth. And once we get that added in there and follow the directions, I'm going to get that stirred in. Next, I'm going to be adding in a 23-ounce marinara sauce jar, and I'm just going to pour that directly in there. This gives us so much flavor. It's really good. We're going to give that a stir, and then after we finish stirring that, we're going to go ahead and add in a 1/2 cup of milk. I used whole milk, but you can use whatever kind you want. And just pour that right in there, stir it up again. And once you've got all that added in and you have this stirred up, I let mine get hot before I did the next step, and I'm going to go ahead and take one 12-ounce box of uncooked bow tie pasta, and I'm just going to dump that right in there, and this is going to cook in this. After I dump it in, I'm going to stir it up, and then I am going to put the lid on this, and I'm going to let it cook for about 5 or so minutes, and then I'm going to come back and just stir it up really well and flip all of the bow tie pastas around. I feel like that helps it cook faster to make sure you get both sides, because these are a little bit thick and they do take a little bit longer than some pastas to cook, I feel like, but I don't know, maybe not that much. But we're just going to let this simmer and stir it up, cover it back up, and let it finish cooking. After that has cooked all the way through, I'm going to go ahead and add my cheeses to this. I didn't measure them, so I'm using mozzarella cheese, and I'm also using Parmesan cheese, and I'm just covering the top with this. And once I get it covered and I feel like that's enough from eyeballing it, I'm going to go ahead and put the lid back on this and just let that melt and stir it around real good. Once that's finished and melted, you can look at this and see if you think that's enough cheese or not. And I just went ahead and decided to add some more cheese to the top of this. And then I'm going to let that melt. And once that is finished, this is ready to serve. This was so good. I topped mine with some grated Parmesan cheese and it was amazing. Lastly, we are making 1 pot chili mac and cheese. So I've got 2 pounds of hamburger here, and I've got about a half an onion that I've chopped up. And I'm just going to cook those together, help flavor everything really well to cook those together. But we are going to ground up our hamburger into small pieces. You can also season this with whatever you like. I'm going to use Montreal steak seasoning, and that is my favorite seasoning to use on beef. It's really good. And I'm just going to mix that up and season it to taste. You can do whatever you want with this, but we're going to add some more measured out seasonings here in a little bit. But once the hamburger meat finishes cooking, we're going to strain it, and then we are going to add about a teaspoon of minced garlic to our pan. Once we do that, we're going to go ahead and just let it set for a minute and let it start heating up, and we're just going to stir it around and kind of toast it and let it get fragrant. That way that the flavors can really start getting drawn out to infuse this food. But we're going to add our hamburger meat back to the pan as well, once that has gotten pretty good and fragrant. And then also, once we do that, we're going to start adding in some seasonings. So I'm going to do 2 tablespoons of chili powder, and we're just going to sprinkle that over the top. Once we have added that in, next we're going to start adding in 2 teaspoons of ground cumin. And we're just going to measure that out and throw it in there. You can adjust these seasonings however you want. I mean, you could add a little more, a little less, however you want to do it. And then once we add that in, I'm going to do 2 teaspoons of smoked paprika. I love smoked paprika. I mean, honestly, you could add a little bit more probably, but I'm just going to do 2 teaspoons. We're going to stir that up really well. And then once we do that, we're going to take a 15-ounce can of chili beans. And I am going to take that and just dump it right in here. I'm using the mild Brooks, but you can use whatever kind you want. If you want to use spicy, feel free to do that. And again, I'm just going to give this a quick stir, and I'm going to start adding in my beef broth. So I'm going to do 3 cups of beef broth, and then I am using beef bouillon base. So, that's why I'm doing it this way. If you want to use regular beef broth, as I've said in my other videos, that is perfectly fine. And once we get that added in, we're going to stir this up really well. But that beef broth base is just going to melt down and stir in more and more as this heats up better once the water gets warm. And I'm just going to go over this with just a little bit of salt and pepper. You can do, whatever seasonings you like, or you don't even have to do that. And then I'm going to add in 3 cups of uncooked elbow noodles. Straight to this once it's heated up and it's kind of simmering. I just like to do it that way so the noodles won't be as starchy. But once you do that and get that added in, we're going to stir it up really well. This is a very simple and very delicious dish that does not take long to throw together and cook. But I'm just going to finish stirring it up, and then once I do that, I'm going to go ahead and let it cook for a little bit and then cover it. And I'm just going to keep doing that to make sure nothing sticks and burns at the bottom. But every time once I finish stirring it, I like to take my spoon and just smooth it out. That way everything will be kind of below the broth line. But we're just going to do this several different times throughout until our noodles have fully cooked and they're going to soak up most of this liquid. You do want this to have a little bit of liquid left in it. If you don't, it's going to get really dry as it cools later on, and you can always thin it back out with more beef broth, or you can use tomato sauce even. Once my noodles are finished cooking, I'm going to add in some cheese, and I'm just doing the cheddar blend. You can feel free to use whatever kind of cheese you want in this, and then here it is finished. This was delicious. All of these recipes were so easy and so simple. I hope that you and your family enjoyed these super easy, delicious recipes as much as mine did. Thanks for watching. Bye!